Adolf Hitler was the most feared dictator the world had ever known. For years, he was the high command who conquered nations and dreamed of an empire that would last 1,000 years. But World War II changed everything. The Red Army was near, and the destruction was imminent. Deep underground, Hitler hid inside the Führerbunker, where he spent his final hours. His loyal companions stayed by his side while the world around him collapsed. In his last 48 hours, he married, dictated his will, and prepared himself for death. The dictator who sought to rule the world met his end. By April 28, 1945, Berlin was collapsing. The Soviet Red Army was everywhere. The city was surrounded, and every single person knew that Nazi Germany had lost the war. But it did not happen overnight. World War II proved to be a devastating battle, especially for Nazi Germany. By early 1945, Nazi Germany was on the verge of total military collapse. The Soviet army was advancing towards Berlin. Hitler was told of this fact, and he retreated to the Berlin bunker that was constructed as a shelter for him. The Reich Chancellery bunker was initially constructed as a temporary air raid shelter for Hitler, but later intensified bombings led to the expansion of this complex as an improvised permanent shelter. Inside this vast complex, there were two separate shelters, the Führerbunker and the Führerbunker. The Führerbunker was located 2.5 meters lower than the Führerbunker, and the two were connected by a stairway. The roof of the Führerbunker was made of concrete, almost 9 feet thick. There were 30 small rooms in the complex, each with a protective concrete layer of almost 4 meters. The Führerbunker was home to dozens of support staff and doctors, along with officers who worked closely with Hitler. Its roof was almost 5 feet 3 inches. It had two entrances arriving at the same hall, one from the new Chancellery and one from the garden of the Foreign Ministry. The hall was separated from the rest of the bunker by a hermetically sealable gas door. Once past the door, the hallway led to a number of rooms, including the dining and conference room, air filters room, water supplies room, several guest rooms, and kitchen and wine store. One of Hitler's closest companions, Joseph Goebbels, who was also the Nazi Minister of Propaganda, lived in the Führerbunker along with his family. But Hitler was not in this section. He resided in the Führerbunker, the more advanced, improvised, and protected shelter. This bunker was well decorated. Expensive carpets lined the floor, and opulent art from the Chancellery hung on the walls. The entry to the Führerbunker was through a steel door. After passing through it, there was a long corridor with rooms on each side. On the right side, there were ventilation and generator rooms. On the left side resided Hitler's mistress, Eva Braun. The bunker also had an antechamber that was known as Hitler's sitting room. It led to Hitler's study room. Inside the study room, on the wall, there was a large portrait of Frederick the Great, one of Hitler's heroes. Next, there was a door leading to Hitler's modestly furnished bedroom. The bunker was self-contained, but it had one problem. It was below the water table, and so the conditions here were unpleasantly damp. Pumps were in action all the time to remove groundwater. Besides this, the complex was a defining image of power and protection. But still, it was this bunker where Hitler and his friends met their fate. By April, Soviet troops were closing in on Berlin. Bombings were intensified. The whole city was in chaos. The Soviet army reached Berlin's outskirts on April 21st. But the worst happened on April 28th, when Hitler heard something on the BBC radio that completely shattered him. His military commander Heinrich Himmler, the man he once trusted so much, was secretly trying to negotiate peace with the Allies. Hitler was furious. To him, this was treason at the highest level. He screamed, raged, and called him a traitor. He ordered commands for Himmler's immediate arrest, but deep down, something struck him badly. It was the realization that even his most loyal followers had abandoned him. But by this time, the Red Army was just a kilometer away from the bunker, and everyone knew that Hitler's fate was near. And even Hitler knew that. During a meeting with General Helmuth Wielding, who was the commander of the Berlin defense area, Hitler was told that the garrison would probably run out of ammunition that night, and the ongoing fight in Berlin would conclude in the next 24 hours. Wielding asked for a breakout permission, which Hitler denied. The situation was clear. The danger was evident. And it all prompted Hitler to make the last decisions of his life. Shortly after midnight on April 29th, Hitler married Eva Braun. The marriage ceremony took place in the map room within the Führerbunker. Goebbels, along with his wife Magda, was also present at the ceremony. A party followed to celebrate the occasion. According to Hitler's personal secretary, Gerda Christian, Hitler mostly talked about the past and happier times during this celebration. He admitted for the first time that the war was lost. He added that he would never allow himself to be captured by his enemies. Instead, he would prefer to shoot himself. The wedding ceremony was brief. After that, Hitler dictated his last will. Admiral Karl Donitz would lead the Reich, with Goebbels as chancellor. Later in the afternoon, Hitler found out about the fate of his ally, Benito Mussolini, and his mistress. Their bodies were cut down and thrown into the gutter. This even strengthened Hitler's resolve to prevent himself or his wife from becoming a spectacle. It was April 30th early morning. Silence inside the bunker. Hitler and Eva's had been married for less than 40 hours. Around 1 a.m., Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel reported that all the troops Hitler relied on to save Berlin either have been surrounded or forced into the defensive. Now, it was time. Hitler appeared in the corridor where about 20 people, mostly women, were assembled to give their farewells. He went down the line, shaking hands and speaking with each of them. Hitler had his final meal, a simple vegetarian dish. Late in the morning, the Soviets were just 500 meters away from the bunker. Around 2:30 p.m., Hitler and his wife Eva entered his personal study, and the door was closed. What happened next was beyond the imagination of every bunker's resident. When Hitler's valet, Heinz Linge, entered Hitler's quarters, he found the door closed and smelled the gunpowder smoke. Linge went back to the corridor and informed Hitler's private secretary, Martin Bormann. The two rushed towards the study room and opened the door. What they found next was beyond startling. Hitler and Eva's bodies were lying there on the sofa. Blood was dripping out of Hitler's right temple. He had shot himself with his own pistol, while Eva, on the other hand, had no visible wounds. Her face showed that she had poisoned herself with hydrogen cyanide. Shortly after, their bodies were taken up the stairs to a small garden outside the door to the bunker complex. Moments later, Goebbels and Bormann also gathered beside the bodies. One of them poured petrol from a can over the bodies, and they were set on fire in an instant. Flames consumed them as the Reich collapsed around them. The people around made the Nazi salute and retreated while the sound of Russian artillery was all around them. The remains of the bodies were buried in a shallow bomb crater. The empire that was dreamed to last 1,000 years collapsed, and it all ended in fire, silence, and ruin. In just 48 hours, Hitler went from a dictator who dreamed of ruling the world to a corpse burning in a garden. His downfall marked not only the end of his life, but the end of the Nazi regime. The Thousand-Year Reich ended not with glory, but with fire in a bunker, which is now nothing more than a parking lot.